Welcome to What We Watch, Doing OK's entertainment podcast. What are we talking about today?
We're talking about Hulu's Looking for Alaska.
Let's get into it. I'm Dan.
I'm Olga.
And we are giving you a full Spoilercast reaction podcast to Looking for Alaska, the whole season. Spoilers ahead for those that are uninitiated. First, some quick housekeeping. Olga destroyed her finger, and it looks beautiful now.
I have a green thumb, as Dan joked after I was in
Stitches.
tears. And
So
technically, yes, I was in stitches.
I wanted to throw out our personal background that might affect our discussion here. So you have the perspective of having read the book. I do not.
Mm-hmm.
John Green's seminal classic.
Prince Award-winning novel.
Prince gave many awards.
Not how that's spelled, but okay.
We're not going to talk that much about the book. Olga might throw in a thought or two, but mainly I'm just going into this as a discussion of death of the author. It doesn't matter. We know there's autobiographical parts of this. And all that stuff. We're just talking about the show.
Yeah.
What we think of the show.
And also, I read it over a decade ago, so I don't really want to, misremember things and have that negatively affect our spoiler review. Yeah.
And so whereas you have the book side of it, I have the OC side of it, as this is a show created by Josh Schwartz for television, and he is the OC guru. Also, he's done stuff for Gossip Girl and Chuck and a whole other slew of things. But this
that you watched and I didn't.
Yes. But
of the two of us. Dan watched Gossip Girl and the OC, and I did not.
Yeah, so the OC is specifically, it's straight out referenced in the show, and it is a huge influence, a lot of the music and stuff like that, because it's the same era. And the last thing I want to throw out here, because it certainly had an emotional impact for me as a viewer, is I had a pretty similar life experience to what is depicted in this show. I had a Alaska-type human, which sadly ultimately ended in her suicide. So that certainly was emotionally intense for me.
Yeah.
But I just want to throw that out there. I don't know. It's important for how I view the show, I think. So, yeah. So why don't we get into it? Overall thoughts. What do you think?
Overall, I thought that it was really great, really enjoyable. I don't really know if I'd call it a fun watch.
It was for two-thirds of it.
There were a lot of fun parts.
Yeah.
But for me, as someone who still doesn't really love this teen soap kind of genre, it was an example of a really good one.
Yeah. And I would almost argue this is more of a coming of age than a teen soap because of the fact that it's a miniseries with a beginning, middle, and end.
Right.
Not to say that teen soaps never have an end, but the soap implies the
melodrama. Yeah.
And I think that, and even though we had some intense things happen, I wouldn't say most of this is super melodramatic.
Right. It touches on serious topics even before the serious topic, but
it just and here I think the thing that works about it, and so much of it that works, is that it feels grounded enough. There are things that are obviously over the top elements, but I do believe these people. And I think that's what's really great, is that there's so many likable characters, and we're going to get into them each individually as we go on. But especially the chemistry between the Colonel and Pudge. I was trying to decide Miles or Pudge.
Miles or Pudge, yeah.
Between them is great. They have a really great core friendship there. And then with Takomi coming in, and Alaska and Pudge, and Alaska and the current, there's so many interesting combos.
Yeah.
And Alaska and Dr. High. There's so many great sparks of chemistry that they did a great job casting this show.
Those casting people are geniuses.
Yeah.
They knew... I don't want to talk about the book too much, but, I never really sat there and thought about who would play those people even when I read it. But, seeing them, I'm like, wow, they found them. They found these characters.
Yeah. And if you don't already know, I just want to throw out that Alaska herself, I have seen now a few times in recent memory between Sierra Burgess is a loser and the Society. So if you want to see more of her. Another like general thing I want to say is it just feels like a livable world that I want to, like, I wish I was there, which a lot of shows like try to get that, but like it seems like a school you wish you could have gone to, or like places you wish you could have hung out at. And I'd say the only downside of that is the slight controversy of how cool it looks to be smoking it out in the smoking hole.
Yeah, like, I want to be at the smoking hole, but I am not a smoker. Yeah. And
it's not great.
I have to say, so again, this book was written in the 2000s and it was autobiographical, and John Green had that experience where I've seen his smoking hole by the creek, like at his boarding school, and that's weird. Yeah. Like, that's it. But the thing is that I'm like, man, I want to hang out under that bridge.
Yeah. And well, again, so I'm happy they didn't neuter it and like take that out of the story, because it is just part of life or whatever. Yeah. But at the same time, it's like
they seem
if I was cool. If I was a 15-year-old watching this, I'd be like, I want to be this person.
Yeah, and they're little, like, very short. If you know someone struggling with like smoking and drinking, go to this website. And it's like, but that was on screen so little that I wouldn't even process that URL. But don't smoke.
You heard it here first.
Don't smoke.
Solid comedy, I'd say, throughout. I'd say more, like, the vast majority of comedic beats they aim for hit, which is impressive.
I can't think of any jokes that didn't. I mean, I'm not saying every joke was laugh out loud funny, but it wasn't meant to be. Yeah. Even
all the poop stuff, which generally I'd roll my eyes at, wasn't necessarily my favorite part, but like, it wasn't that bad. Yeah. And like, I think in general, the whole prank atmosphere, even if it's something that a lot of shows have hit on, they had some nice inventive ideas. There were a lot of great moments that came from the pranks, and I'm glad that they sort of carried throughout the series.
Yeah. It's like, premise-wise, is it a little goofy that pranks have caused all this trouble and pranks are legendary here, and the entire stuff is you don't rat, and it's like premise is one thing, but delivery, it delivered.
Yeah, 100%. So then there's, generally there's a lot of emotionally powerful moments, especially in the back third, which we can get to more later. I don't know if anything you wanted to specifically point out for that part.
I mean, for me, it's like you have the emotional moments, but you also have like the real world tie-ins to those emotional moments. Like, you have people giving their monologues, and sometimes monologues can come off a little bit melodramatic or like unnecessary, but there are some like real issues behind them a lot of the time, especially with the Colonel. Yeah. And it felt real. It felt purposeful.
Yeah. I think one of the strengths of the show was how they would point out like the unfairness of things, like with the Colonel, or like if you'd feel bad for Alaska for certain things. But then it always come back to, but if you just hadn't screwed up, like you made your own bed, it's like, I feel bad that Alaska was forced to rat, but she wouldn't have been forced to rat if she hadn't been smuggling alcohol in, and all the same thing with the Colonel. It's like, if you hadn't done the prank, then this wouldn't have happened, but while still also showing that their life is tough. So I think they did a very good job of making these like anti-hero-ish characters that like the show is never saying like they're all right or they're all wrong. It's just like they just keep getting in these cycles of screwing up. That is kind of what being a teenager is. Right.
Some of my bigger mistakes happened towards the end of college, and there were ways that other choices I could have made and things I could have done better. And I had my reasons for doing what I did and all of that, but still it's like, the reasoning I had was, I made my bed, now I have to lie in it. And now it's years later, and some of those things are still affecting my life. Yeah. And it's like, well, I can sympathize with these characters because I feel the same way of like, well, how long am I supposed to be
the perpetual screw up?
Punished for it. And it's like, well, you're young and you're stupid sometimes, and you can't see another way. Yeah. And that's what they have. They only have so many coping mechanisms laid out in front of them, be it pranks or alcohol.
I told you not to do so many poop pranks in college. Anyway, let's talk about some of the sort of negative sides of here. Yeah. So, I'd say that some of the weak points are some of the pretentious dialogue, which,
even though they do call it out.
Yeah.
And they do tone it down relative to the book.
Yeah. There are certainly lines. And again, I was a little bit, I don't know, biased or whatever you want to say by the fact that you had already read the book and you would point out when a line came up that was a book-specific line.
Yeah, sorry
and
about
also,
that.
like, I came in with some preconceived notions about the Manic Pixie Dream Girl thing, which we'll get into in a second.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as the pretentious stuff, I'd say almost every line that you pointed out, oh, that was from the book, I would say, humans don't speak that way.
Yeah.
Maybe we didn't need that. And it's an interesting thing because, like, I also enjoyed, Dawson's Creek, which was, like, super humans don't speak that way. But I feel like this was uneven enough that it wasn't like, this is the style of the show, get used to it. It was like, it was the style of the show for, like, the first episode, and then it would just come up randomly
Very
throughout.
randomly.
Yeah.
and to me, what that signaled was that they recorded more dialogue that was more in line with that.
Yeah.
That was, so because the book is following Pudge mostly, like, he really is the protagonist.
The central Pudge.
Yeah. Sorry.
I gotcha.
Yeah. We're in his head, so when he says or hears a sort of literary pretentious thing, it's like whatever. But when you have very human characters and then all of a sudden he's pulling some of his book dialogue out, you're just like, what? Yeah. Where did this come from?
Yeah, it's interesting because not to say that all of it doesn't work. Like, I think the labyrinth stuff generally works. I think that Alaska, Alaska being intelligent is generally good, and like her quick-witted stuff, I'm on board with.
Right.
It's more just like every once in a while, it's like this sounds written as opposed to how a human speaks. But the problem is that it's not like consistently that. It's just that it like comes into that and then out of that.
Yeah.
And I think especially it hurt Pudge in the beginning because it was so heavily like, I don't believe this person as a human being, because it was like all about the literary stuff. And I think it got a lot better with time, but
it did. But at the same time, I think there still could have been a few more darlings that they could have killed, or that they could have reworked. And maybe it was just like, these were the first scenes filmed and they hadn't like fully figured out their tone yet.
Well, I think it's just generally some of the growing pains of adaptation. Like, generally, it sounds like they made some good choices when adapting, but to a certain degree, people are coming to the property expecting something. And, like, this is a big name. Like,
it is.
It's a big name.
We've had the promise of this since I had read the book. Yeah. And I was like 14 or 15.
Yeah, so like, they had to hit certain beats to a certain degree, but I feel like they were finding that balance and finding, like, what worked on a book and what worked 10 years ago. It's all that balancing act. All right, let's get into the characters, and we're going to go starting with Alaska. We're not going to necessarily go into as much detail with everybody, but mostly, the core three. But Alaska, let's talk about this Manic Pixie Dream Girl idea and the criticism launched against one Alaska that we don't know if it's fair or not. Do you want to read this?
Yes, yeah. I'm pulling it up. So where did you find this definition?
It's like some stuff from Wikipedia and shit.
Wikipedia and shit, guys. Yep. The Manic Pixie Dream Girl exists solely in the fevered imaginations of sensitive writer-directors to teach broodingly soulful young men to embrace life and its infinite mysteries and adventures. Manic Pixie Dream Girls are said to help their men without pursuing their own happiness. This stock character has no discernible inner life and usually only exists to provide the protagonist some important life lessons. The Manic Pixie Dream Girls idealize women as things rather than respecting them as real people with their own complex needs.
The basic idea here is it's the quirky, manic girl with a funky name, and she's
funky hair,
living life, but she's brooding, and she's something else there, but she's just there to like show the man how to live, is the criticism. Right? And it's complicated. We went back and forth about this a lot.
We did. And a lot of it is, a lot of the narrative of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl is actually how often characters that are labeled as such aren't actually those kinds of characters. Yeah. They can be like not well-written women, but they don't necessarily fit this specific criteria.
I would say that there's the manic pixie dream girl archetype. So it's like, oh, the character that's quirky and has a funky name and, has odd habits. And
has a man in love with her.
Yeah, but that's just an archetype. The criticism comes in basically when you're saying she's an idea, not a real person in the story. She's just there to move the man forward. She doesn't have her own goals, her own agency, her own life and thoughts.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you told me quite a bit about how in the book she was criticized a lot, but we're here to talk about the show.
We are.
Do you feel like she is a manic pixie dream girl in the critical sense?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I think that one of the successes of this show is that really by having us see her exclusively through her own solo time, that we have and her actually taking some of the lines that are said about her, she says some of them.
Yeah.
She finds the solution to her labyrinth of suffering. Yeah. Well, maybe that's the wrong way of putting it, but
she figures out the solution of the labyrinth.
She posits the idea that the labyrinth is suffering.
Yeah.
And before that was something that Pudge was trying to find for her. Yeah. And it's she's still looking, even though she tells him to go look for it. She's still not just sitting back and being I'm going to let the man figure it out. And that's an oversimplification of how she is in the books as well. I actually, on retrospect, don't think she is one in the books either, but I could see the criticism.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as the show goes, I think they did a great job of sort of having Pudge, Alaska, and the Colonel all as kind of equally-ish protagonists.
Yeah.
Yes, Pudge is our entry into the world. Yes, he's maybe the prime protagonist, but the Colonel and Alaska both are very neck and neck with him.
Yes.
And I think they did a great job with her as far as, they flesh out her backstory. She has, numerous goals and trials and tribulations. She deals with the rat hole storyline. She deals with Jake.
Yeah, I was going to say, getting to see her alone with Jake and actually seeing their relationship was good.
Yeah, she, has stuff while Pudge is off with Lara. She has her own traditions. She has her own hopes. And, I think she's definitely a realized character. I think the actress did a great job as her.
She did.
Definitely a high point of the show and a believable person who I think you can even if you're just talking about the archetype, you can go too far with the manic pixie dream girl thing of they're too quirky. We're just you don't believe they're just silly characters. She just seems like a damaged girl who I buy, who's still smart and has a fun loving side, but she's a totally believable. I knew people like her.
Yeah.
So let's talk about her fate. And obviously, her death is a big thing in the books. Do you think that this story needs Alaska to die? Or do you think they could have just not even had that and the show would have been just as good?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I really don't. I don't want her to be dead.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could say if where they took Pudge and Takumi and the Colonel and Lara and the school, was it worth it?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I don't think it would be fair in a way to change the premise of this adaptation so severely as to have her stay alive. I feel like that couldn't have been on the table. Yeah. And I think even if you say well, is it bad politics? I don't think so, because they balanced her character fairly well.
You did personally take issue with the fact that they have sex and then she immediately dies.
I did. Yeah. Yes. So that was something that, to my memory, never happens in the book.
Yeah.
And that feels like a weird punishment of she has this swell of happiness, and now it comes crashing down so severely that we don't even know, was she just drunk? Was she suicidal? That's the mystery. That's the question. And it's well, man, it didn't have to suck so hard after really throwing her to be continued in the face of not just Pudge, but the viewers.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that, it also was a punishment for Pudge in a way, right? So it's not just they're punishing the female character, but I think that so it's one thing about should they have changed it from the book? Or let's take that out of it, right? As far as a story, does it make sense for the story for her to die then? And what I would say is that what we got in the last two episodes were a lot of really good, powerful moments.
Mm-hmm.
But they were also felt so separate from what the show had been up until that point that it felt like, like I don't know that when you look at it as an 8-episode miniseries, like if they hadn't been doing the before, like 10 days before, whatever, like would it have felt like this is where the story is going? And does it make sense when Alaska is one of the main characters to have her arc just end ambiguously and not have it be she makes a final decision or she has a tragic thing and we know, like, obviously it's tragic, but we don't even know, like, she was building something, she was changing in some way, and then it just is over and we don't know why or how, like.
Well, we're in the place of her friends.
Yeah, and so but that goes at odds with the fact that we had been seeing her outside of just her friend's point of view. On the flip side, so here's the thing, I'm very torn about this.
Yes.
I think it's really interesting that they leave it up to interpretation, that way they leave it ambiguous. I thought it was great how they had this whole, like, trying to figure out the mystery, and then ultimately Takomi's like, guys, you're never gonna fucking know. Like,
and you have to accept that.
Yeah, and I think that's really powerful and real. Yeah, it could be a discussion about don't drink and drive. It could be just shit happens. It could be she committed suicide.
Life isn't fair.
Yeah. And so that's where I'm sort of stuck between, like, I feel like it messes up her as a story. Like, what is her story here? She had a shitty life, shitty things happened to her, and then she died. Like that's,
on paper, that is what it is. Like, but the whole idea is, like, but she's more than that. She's more than a tragic story.
Yeah.
And that's the thing where, like, take the Manic Pixie Dream Girl element out. Was she just a two-dimensional character? She was not.
No.
And I could see how, however, her ending and turning her still into this mystery, it has the shades of making her two-dimensional again.
It's not that I would say that it makes her two-dimensional. It's more that it does make her more into, like, an idea, like, reverts her into an idea, which is something we had talked about is I feel like they should have shown her more in the final 2 episodes. Yeah. I talked about, like, if we had seen her actually write down in the Labyrinth book, like, straight and fast or whatever it was, like, I want to see that moment where she figured that out and wrote that down. I thought it would be interesting if they had shown, like ambiguous flashes of the ways she could have died, right?
Although
and,
that could have been very triggering, but yes.
Yeah.
It would have been at least, like,
I mean, we saw it slam directly no matter what.
It would have been an attempt to put us back with her.
Yeah.
And I think we were missing that.
I needed more of her, even if it was still left ultimately ambiguous.
Yes.
That being said, personally, what do you think happened to her?
I think it's a combination.
Yeah.
I think that she wouldn't have made that decision had she not been drinking so much. I think the whole idea of, like, how was she even that drunk and functional?
Yeah.
Like,
there's a little bit of oddness there.
There is. Like, she didn't come off that way. Like, there's no... We didn't see her, like, continuing to drink in the car. We didn't see, like...
Yeah.
We don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that she was conscious.
Yeah. When
she made that choice. Like, when she didn't swerve out of the way.
I think she committed suicide, personally. But, obviously, you can interpret it how you want to.
I think that I'd rather just, like... feel what her friends feel.
So, Pudge, I want to talk about him. And so it was interesting for me watching him because you had built up for me the idea that, like, his whole arc was going to be him win the Manic Pixie Dream Girl and him learning that she's more than just this creation, this perfect idea in his head of the perfect girl, learning to see her as her and all that stuff. And so... I feel like...
I may have been overly harsh about him as well, but he idealized her.
Yeah, and the fact that I feel like in the show at least, they did a job where I felt like, there was a little bit of him seeing, like, overly falling head over heels for her, but ultimately, like, not even, like, by the middle of the season, like, she... said no to him at Thanksgiving. And then he, like, he was kind of angry and resentful, but ultimately, like, he didn't keep pushing. Like, it's better to be like, I'm going to stop talking to you than it is like, I'm going to keep pushing and trying or whatever, right? And then he started dating someone else, and he was actually a good friend to her when they had the whole night of the best day, worst day. And then they only ever like reconnected when she came forward.
Right.
So personally, I was like, oh, I don't see how her dying affects his arc, because I felt like he'd already sort of completed it before she died. But you want to talk about like how like the last words thing is really his arc in a way, or the great perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, for him, and this was the thing that I thought they just kind of dropped for the better in this, of like, he came to Culver Creek to find his great perhaps his big adventure, and Alaska was that adventure. He was like, oh my God, she's the answer to what I've been looking for. I knew I would find that here, and it's not in a location or in a like journey. It is in a person.
Yeah.
And because they dropped that, like, pretty much
for a significant amount of this show.
Yeah, without, like, Lara brings that up once of basically saying, like, you keep choosing Alaska over me because you associate her with this great perhaps. And then she mocks him for it. And then they don't bring it up again until, like,
later in the end.
Very, very end. So for him, that is tied with this thing of last words. His thing is, I want to know her last words. I don't know. It was to be continued. Well, what did she continue with saying? It's like, his whole thing is about moving past what people's last actions were and why that's not actually meaningful.
Yeah, that's not the measure of a person.
Exactly. Yeah. It's actually them as a whole and their journeys and their influences on people.
Yeah.
Because even though things fall apart in the end, you can't base something off of an ending.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm also very much like, I don't care about the mystery and the answer to it, because she was more than that, and we got to see that.
Yeah. And so I guess the thing is that just, my problem with that is, it's a cool idea, but it also kind of flies in the face of that's a good idea for a person in real life, but it flies in the face of script writing as far as, like, what is her story? It just gets cut off without any sort of satisfying anything, whereas the rest of them get their denouement. The rest of them have their climactic,
and that's why I think it would have been better to continue to get to see her in a few more ways.
Yeah.
But the whole idea is it's not fucking fair. She doesn't get to live her ending.
I do think they did a good job in some ways of continuing these existential questions throughout the season. Dr. Hyde's class, I think, did a big part of that.
Such a great job. And frankly, her relationship with Hyde and Pudge's relationship with Hyde, they're similar, but they're all different in ways that benefit these characters.
And even Colonel by the end there, I think certainly the themes carry throughout, and him learning about life is there. I just felt like that didn't seem like what the core of his story was. It was that at the very first episode, and it was that for the last two episodes. Yeah. But in between there, it was just so much more about just romance.
Quips about it in his romance. Lives his romance life, and still does have hearts feels for Alaska.
I will say overall, I think we can both agree that Pudge is kind of the weak link of the show. Not to say he's terrible.
Right.
But he's the most basic character of the bunch. The actor does his best job to breathe some life into him. He has some great acting moments.
Absolutely.
Some uneven acting moments.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately it's like, well, what do we know about him? He likes girls and he likes last words. Who is this? Like, everybody else I felt like had way more depth, way more backstory, way more oomph to them. And I was saying, to me, it's like he almost feels like an avatar of like, oh, you other boys, put yourself into him. Like,
well, and that was part of the idea behind him as well. Yeah. And also the criticism of like, well, if Alaska's what boys want, then you can be the boy who wants Alaska,
Yeah. We're going to jump through these other people faster, which is sad because the Colonel is fucking great.
The Colonel was, to me, the absolute highlight of this show. Like, without him being exactly how he was, I don't think I would have really loved the show as much as I did.
He's perfection. The performance is so good. His chemistry with absolutely everyone is great. He's flawed in multiple ways. He keeps fucking up, but he's really smart and he's really likable and he's hilarious. And
he's heartbreaking. And again, he's the person who's like stop getting in your own way. But I understand why you do.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah, and they hit on race stuff without beating you over the head with it. Like, that's
and
not
class stuff.
Yeah, that's not like his character. That's part of who he is. And like, he's such a great combination of, just, I don't know. They just do such a great job with his anger, with his outbursts, with his just raging emotions. And like,
also with his sensitivity, though, too.
Yeah.
Like, he is not, the stereotype of the angry black man.
Yeah.
He's not the stereotype of the black nerd either.
Yeah.
He defies easy labeling.
Yeah. And well, I think the other thing is that it's not just that what he gets, like, angry. He also gets like cutting.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fact, like, when he like basically blames Alaska that last night, like, that like hits you in the gut, right? Yeah. And it's like, there's so many moments like that where you're like, no, don't do this, I love you, but you still love him in spite of his problems.
It's like, I feel like his mom sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Where when he's like, you're still gonna love me even if I screwed up, right? And it's like, yes, Chip, we do love you. Yes.
Sarah should have loved him better. The only thing I want to say about Sarah is it's not a bad, like, what they do with that two of them, I think overall is pretty good. It just, I wanted something a little bit more from her by the end. I felt like she had a good beginning and middle, and then it's just like, at the end she's like still a good friend or whatever. But that was the thing, like,
they weren't, he messed it up too much. So I kind of like that they didn't get back together.
But you could have had him overcome some of his problems in order to get back together. Like, I guess my feeling is,
I don't need it to be.
Personally, I think the issue is that because it's an only 8-episode thing, like, when they broke up, I had barely just started to get invested in them. Mm-hmm. And so, like, I needed...
I was invested with a cotillion episodes.
It was good, but it was like literally the next episode they broke up, right?
Something like that.
Takumi, awesome actor, deserved more to do.
Yeah.
I think his best moment is at the end where he sort of talks about the bullshit of the mystery and all that stuff. I love him and Lara, even though they like barely ever just cute together. Yeah. But cute. Lara's great.
Mm-hmm. Her story is great, what they gave her, and how she had shades of, again, she was her own person. Yep. She wasn't just there to be like Pudge's girlfriend and then Takumi's girlfriend.
She was very, very, very good.
Yeah.
And then the Eagle, I think, is actually very interesting because I had issues with him at first. I think it took me a very long time to warm up to him because he feels like a very stock character.
Yeah.
Like, not just the disciplinarian, but I feel like we've already gotten to the second level of the trope on top of the disciplinarian of like the dorky disciplinarian or like the like, oh, I ruined my life disciplinarian.
So they take that like caricature that is very basic, and it's like, you start to like root for him a little bit with the French teacher, but beyond that, you're just like, oh man, he's actually trying with these kids.
And in some ways, Alaska dying helped his character more than any other character. Like, her death really gave him depth and made me believe in this person and made it believe that he was trying so hard to be a good person and to keep these kids together, and then he felt like he screwed up so heavily.
I felt it with the Colonel, where he's like, I'm rooting for you here, and you're getting, like, him lecturing him isn't out of, like, I'm angry with you and I'm punishing you. It's really of, like, this needs to be your wake-up call. Like, you were supposed to have this earlier. Like, I thought he was fantastic from that point going forward.
I can see that for sure.
Yeah.
Dr. Hyde, we kind of have hit on, but, like, just continuously great dialogue, great performance, great backstory.
Mm-hmm. At first, I was like, why are they spending so much time on him?
Yeah.
This feels unnecessary. And then it was so necessary of, again, like, helping them process. And in a lot of ways, it's like, he's there to show you get through tragedy, as unspeakable as it is. Like, if things had gone differently for Alaska, she would have been in his shoes in, like, 40 years.
Yeah. All right, I just wanted to end out with a quick few standout moments, some of my favorite bits from the show. The concussion stuff.
I am concussed.
awesome comedy there.
So good.
Him and Lara were great in that.
Yeah.
All sorts of really fun stuff with the concussion. The Thanksgiving episode overall, I thought was a real standout episode. It was nice,
yeah.
I love the stuff of just Pudge and Alaska, but then once they actually go to the Colonel, like there's so many.
Dolores.
It's like a never-ending episode. I felt
like
there were so many
long,
pieces
but it was
to
good. And even them, like again, the rat business and how she's. I liked her character. Again, I feel like Dolores, like stupid children.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then the moment of the doing the best and worst day game, I thought was, again, like just like the epitome of coming of age scene and just everybody getting a little, I mean, it's such an interesting way of like, it's almost like a writing exercise, right? If you're writing characters, you're like, what's their best day and their worst day? And it shows you something about them.
And is it lazy to just have a character give a monologue about this thing? Does it matter? Because that's something I would do with my friends.
Yeah.
We would sit at a bonfire and be like, you have to say one thing you regret and one thing you wish for. And it's like, shit got deep.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, I think that it isn't lazy, I guess, exposition because it's meaningful that she chose to say that.
Right.
Right?
She kept it secret for all that time.
Yeah. And why she chose to say it and how it affected the people around her. Yeah. And I also think there's even something revealing in a good and bad way about Pudge basically not having a bad day. Like, I feel like there's something to be said there that, like, I can actually relate to at least at that point in my life where I started to realize I'm like, oh, I'm a white teenage boy. My life's been a lot better than a lot of the people I'm talking to. Mm-hmm. Huh. I never realized that before. Some shit has happened since then. But at the time, that's certainly something that, like, make you stop and go, huh, these people have had a way more difficult life than I have.
Yeah. And I'm lucky.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, it's like appreciation before grown-up life hits you. And when it hits him, he's destroyed. Yeah. And I think that's the next thing on your list.
Is him sort of breaking down to his mom about not wanting to get over his grief and not wanting to forget the people he's lost. And he just has an amazing monologue in his bedroom there. I thought was highlight of the show.
It was his highlight as an actor as well, I think.
Yeah. And then on the totally opposite end of the spectrum, the stripping prank.
That was so great.
They saved the best for last.
They did.
Yeah. And I actually think they did a very good job in the final two, at least in the final episode, of balancing the super dark stuff with continuously funny moments. They still
everything was well earned.
Yeah. It's a good show.
It was a good show.
Really enjoyed it.
I'm very happy with how they did it. Yeah. It's not an easy book to adapt. I think that's one of the reasons it
took so long.
It floated around and everyone was like, this is great and on paper, but we want to make these changes. And then it finally found the right people who handled it.
And it
impeccably.
And I feel like it was so great for Josh Schwartz too, who I legitimately feel like at least season 1 of the OC is like TV at its, like this kind of TV at its finest. And he's had a lot of misfires, in my opinion, throughout the years, but this feels like a return to form for him. Mm-hmm. And I hope that he can like stick on to that a little bit because he did a really good job here, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously he had material to work from, but still.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. This stuff is gonna stay with me. And I mean, the book stayed with me for many years and it was at a pivotal time in my life. And now I'm like, well, I'm not relating to it as much in the story element, but it doesn't mean it's not worth thinking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And in some ways, I love that it's 8 episodes because, like, maybe 2 years from now, I just go through those 8 episodes again, you know?
And we look at it all over.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Let us know what you guys think about this season in the comments below. Did they make changes you didn't like? Were there certain things that stuck out to you as good or bad?
Do you disagree with us on how we saw the characters or the messages of the show?
All those fun things. Let us know in the comments below. Please like, subscribe, and all that jazz. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you're doing okay.